So this tattoo that I'm drawing is an homage to my family heritage from both my mom and my father, and I hope to get it on my chest. It's a little exaggerated, but I have this massive mackerel that these 3 people have just caught. It's symbolic of my family's relationship with the ocean. When I first got my tattoos, my mom cried. They hated it. She thought I was going to be a failure. The first one who taught me how to cook, I would have to say, is my mom. I always hung around the kitchen, so she would let me taste things. It's how I developed my palate. I learned how carrots taste, how onions taste. I have a special relationship with her garden. When I had a stomach ache, my mom would pick the leaves off of the male pomegranate tree, bushes of lemongrass, the kaffir lime tree. My mom and my dad would always tell me to go outside and pick so they could cook for dinner.
New soil in.
Nhưng mà hồi nhỏ đó là nó biết ăn cái gì lắm, mà nó đi chợ với mẹ nó biết mua, rồi nó đòi mua rau thơm. Ổng nói ngọng nó cười lắm, nói mẹ con muốn cái này thơm thơm.
My mom's very poetic in a lot of ways. She cherishes things from her island. On all of our trips, my mom would bring something back. This is literally our land. This is our heritage. She has this theory that if you mix these shells into the soil in our backyard garden, it will help things grow. My family is from Phu Quoc Island. In Phu Quoc Island, if I could paint a visual for you guys, South China Sea, this whole region of China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and I exist in this small little island right down here off the shores of Cambodia, away from Vietnam. Everyone in my family fished in the ocean. Ocean was a big part of our culture, big part of our heritage, big part of our bloodline. I remember hanging out with my uncles in Vietnam where they would tell me that they wouldn't feel well if they didn't see the ocean that day. I still try to stay connected to the island, bringing back ingredients from our family farms. Peppercorns, cashews, but most importantly, fish sauce. We've been making fish sauce ever since 1895.
Không có lượt con kéo ra chừng 10 mấy ngày cái nó trong rồi.
When you walk through my parents' garden, there's definitely a feel of being in Vietnam. The perilla, the fishwort, the Thai bird chilies, the sugar cane that we have back there, the list goes on and on. My parents were forced out of their homeland. If they didn't leave, they tell me all the time they would have starved. My dad experienced 2 wars. He was drafted by the Democratic Vietnam Army as a very, very young man to engage in war with the Khmer Rouge, which is a Nazi-like regime that existed in Cambodia. My dad had to go through his second war with my mom, not as a soldier, but as a civilian, where they were able to navigate and escape Vietnam on a boat to make it over to Thailand in a refugee camp. I think my dad was in those late teens by then, early 20s, something like that. I can't imagine doing that as a young man.
15 tuổi bà ngoại cho mẹ đi học may đồ. Làm sao biết cắt, làm sao biết đo cái body, cái người của người ta đó. Chừng nào mẹ vô chạy đi nạn, mẹ không có quần áo, rồi mình đi trường học ta cho mình quần áo lớn đó, mình phải sửa lại quần áo nhỏ. Chừng nào mình đi á, mình đâu có đem được nhiều quần áo, nhưng mà đi biển, ở ngoài biển tới 2-3 ngày nè. Giờ bị cướp biển này kia, người ta lấy hết đồ rồi, bị cướp biển lấy hết quần áo, rồi cái mình phải đi vô chạy đi nạn, mỗi người có một bộ dính trong mình thôi. Rồi người ta hỏi mình, người ta thấy mẹ may quần áo mẹ bận á, rồi người ta mướn mẹ làm. Mẹ được trả 30 bát. 30 bát của Thái Lan á, ăn được một ngày, sống được một ngày, 30 bát, không biết là bao nhiêu tiền Mỹ nữa, khoảng chừng hồi đó mẹ nghĩ là chừng đồng hay là đồng rưỡi gì, $1 hay là $1.50 gì đó, something like that.
It wasn't until these most recent years where I started to cook. My mom was able to open up to me about a few stories of how life was like during the war. If you ask her about food, she taught herself how to cook in a refugee camp. So her basics are rooted in using whatever she could find. Aside from that, we don't actually talk about the war. The earliest memory of my dad and I used to fish underneath the Bay Bridge. And we used to catch everything from like shark, which people wouldn't eat. We would. Stingrays, Fairfield River and Sacramento River, we would fish for bass, catfish. We would go super late at night, like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, and we would camp out. And we would buy certain food items to just get us through the night and eat, sometimes corn, sometimes we would crayfish if that was in season, rice, obviously, like minimal, simple things. But usually we would bet on the hopes of catching fish to cook and eat it in that moment. In my preteen years, I noticed that most of my uncles, my dad's friends included, had a bunch of restaurants, mainly pho restaurants. That kind of turned me on to restaurants and serving food, was that I had this great relationship with food already from my upbringing. That was my insight into success. Manual labor. My parents never wanted me to work with my hands. My dad used to tell me, I want you one day to sit in a chair, make phone calls, manage from a desk. I think manual labor is just a nice way of us Westerners saying that we don't feel like your skill set is a highly skilled craft. It's been raining all week, and this is the first break of sun that we got, so why not go outside and barbecue, right? Rare opportunity to hang out with my pops and my mom. Decided to go out and get some fish and cook. So we brought in chili pepper cod and we bought ling cod today. My mom, with all the bones and the scraps, she's gonna be making jiao, which is rice porridge. She's gonna make a broth or fumet with the fish bones and all the fish scraps that my dad and I are using. She's gonna make this beautiful rice porridge soup out of it. My dad saved all the bloodline for me, so I'm gonna make a dish with it. Bloodline in the fish exists in between the skin and the flesh itself. And the reason why it's red is because in so darkness, that's where all the blood is. You have this deep, dark, bold flavor that you usually don't see in fish. It's literally the essence of the fish. Restaurants would throw this beautiful chain away. People always complain that essence of fish is usually a fishy thing. Ironic, right? I mean, if you want the flavor of fish, you should embrace it. In the US, it's about prime cuts, what looks pretty on a plate. So much is thrown away, which creates a bias of what's good. On Phu Quoc, we eat everything, bones, bloodline. But I actually learned how to eat this in Oakland. As a kid, Dad would bring home all the scraps. We didn't have much money, so we just see value in things that people wasted or threw away. My parents were able to make it into like a beautiful dish that nourished both myself and my sister. They never told us you have to eat this because we're refugees. It was eat this because it tastes good. Funny story about my parents. My parents met each other in their teens, and the only thing he knew how to do was fish and dive. So he would go out to the market, dive for fish, and try to sell whatever fish he caught for that day to provide for his family. My dad had a family of 12 to feed. Brothers and sisters, and his mother included. So my dad didn't have time for dates. But at his small little stand at the fish market, my mom started to notice this handsome man. He would save the best catch of the day that he had for my mom. And as things progressed, it was my mom that asked my dad out. As the war started escalating and the presence of communism started to increase, my parents' relationship grew into an intimate one, to the point they eloped together.
Bộ đồ 1975 á, mẹ còn nhỏ lắm mà cũng không biết tại sao, tại vì giống như là chừng nào không có được đi học nữa, không có đủ gạo ăn, về không có được buôn bán gì hết á. Ở nhà ai cũng không có thiếu đồ ăn, thì mẹ xù xì chạy rồi đi qua Thái Lan ở 9 tháng. Mẹ được nhà thờ sponsor đi qua Auckland. Mẹ đi làm hotel mà mẹ đi làm ở trong cái chỗ vậy. Người ta ship khăn á, để mà ta organize, người ta ship khăn mà người ta để cho khách. Bà đi nấu.
Cá nước mắm siêu đường.
Nước mắm siêu đường.
Rồi muốn nướng thử nữa. Thì làm busboy cho nó làm được mấy tháng rồi, cái người ship cook nó thấy tôi giỏi quá mới dạy tôi nấu. Nó giết thời gian nhiều quá, nó có thời gian nhiều trong nhà hàng quá, không có thời gian cho gia đình. Bởi vì nó chưa có gia đình. Còn chú có gia đình, chú thì làm như vậy là cái chuyện về gia đình của mình thôi. Cuộc sống, thành ra chú phải làm.
You know, they've been committed to each other for close to 40 years. And funnily enough, because my mom was rich and my dad was poor, they never got a blessing to get married. There was a brief period in time where I wanted to like MMA fight and do martial arts and do all the cool things. I grew up in Oakland in one of the roughest neighborhoods in the nation. In the 90s, I was always involved in some sort of fight. So the kids would, do the common thing and try to either take my shoes, ask for $1. You know, the classic bully tactics, right? I'd say no because I'm hard-headed. We get in a fight. Whether I win or they win, didn't matter because they'll always come back with their 10 friends and I'll get my ass kicked. I wasn't able to connect with my parents about that because they literally lived in a war zone and they were dodging bullets. And they found a way to escape that. And they would always challenge me if they were able to dodge and escape bullets and, genocide and all those things. Why wasn't I able to dodge bullies in fights? And it gave me a lot of perspective, It taught me that if they could do things in that extreme situation, there's opportunity for me to figure out things in my situation. I think that contributed a lot to my success in being a chef. The aha moment came in my high school years as I started to cook more and I started to, my parents allowed me to actually use the stove and I would actually cook dinner and, mainly with barbecue and, fried rice and, simple, amateur level stuff, home cooked stuff. And then people started to like my food. I was connecting with people, but I was able to trigger an emotion in somebody, make them happy through something I did. To have that type of acknowledgement felt great. My mom cooked out of necessity to feed her family. I mean, of course there was joy in that, but I wanted to translate my emotion of joy in cooking into a career. And my mom thought that was absurd because my dad used to be a kitchen manager, in a Chinese restaurant and just very exploitive, lots of hours, lots of stress, lots of hard work. So I told my mom I wanted to go to cooking school. She freaked out.
Nên ông nói, mẹ ngồi xuống. Nó nói với mẹ là nó muốn đi học nấu ở bên San Francisco ở trường gì á. Oh my God, trời đất ơi. Mẹ nói con học nấu. Con đâu có biết làm cái gì đâu mà con nấu. Thì nó nói Mom, I know what I want. Oh my God, trời đất ơi, mẹ từ giống như ở trên sky rơi xuống á.
Asian parents are hard, man. It's very opposite of what you see nowadays and what the Western world encourages you to teach your kids. You know, I see on TV, I think it was like some special like parenting program, and it was saying like, you need to encourage your kids. You need to validate them and let them know they did a good job. And I'm not questioning that. I'm pretty sure it works, but I didn't get that, you know? For me, my parents were very hard. It's like they were very critical. Hey, Mom, I got a B minus. Why didn't you get an A plus? Or, hey, Mom, I cooked this. Close, but not right. You can't call this that dish if it's not right. I mentioned to my parents that I was going to be on Top Chef. My mom was like, what is that? My dad was like, are you getting paid?
It really spoke to potluck. There was a lot of freshness, a lot of herbaceousness. The winner of the first quickfire challenge is Tu.
When my dad asked me if I'm getting paid, that tells you everything about what he went through, what he thinks. But it's not something we really talked about. We come from two different cultures. My dad's Vietnamese. That's mixed with Khmer and Chinese as well. And I am this 6'2", oversized Vietnamese-American growing up in Oakland. Different cultures, growing up in different places, so we really couldn't connect.
Bà không cho ăn nữa đó. Không hả? Hả? Ăn nữa hả? No, too much.
Earlier today, we went out to the Asian market to pick fish. You know, we were gonna scan over things to see what we're gonna cook for the day. And I swear to you, like, it must have been over 10 years since I did that with my dad. I riffed with my dad. I'm like, Dad, you're the fish expert. What do you think we should get? We both agreed that we should get something alive. And we ended up picking ling cod. Local fish, super delicious, great flesh, nice bite to it, good fish fat. And then we broke it down. I tend to forget how precious moments like that are. I remember meeting this guy. I was introduced to him by a client. So he introduces me. I was like, hey, come over here too. I want you to meet my colleague. I want you to meet my friend. Shake hands with him. This is my chef. We're doing work together. He's helping me developing some stuff. The guy immediately looks at me and tells me to my face, man, you look like a mechanic. You know, the interesting thing is, in that moment, I started to understand even more so why my dad didn't want me to cook. Dad has this image in his head of how people treat people, especially in food. That's this thing about using my hands. But as a kid, your parents have this idea of what they want. And really, you just want to be just like them. Parents are from an island called Phu Quoc, and that's where most of the blood flows. That's where...
Có nhiều món cũng có nhiều món có.
The sauce that I'm making is very simple in terms of the amount of ingredients, but it's the way you put it together. And it's seasoned vinegar, usually coconut vinegar with lots of alliums, lots of aromatics, lemongrass, ginger. We're gonna go out to the yard and get kaffir lime leaves, beautiful lemongrass that my mom has, and we're gonna spike it with the, we call it crazy chili that my mom has. It works really well with Bloodline. And I'm just going to slice it thin as I can. I'm no sushi chef, but I'm gonna try my best. My dad's the expert. I wanna make him proud, right? And you slice your fish, dip it in the vinegar. Not that it will mask the fish essence, it will be very complementary to it. You have fat, you have vinegar, and all these spices, and the right ratios of everything. You take it out and you wrap it in your spring roll. The Bloodline, I serve it, and the techniques I use are basically the same as what my mom and dad would use. A combination of Phu Quoc, the camps, Oakland. An interesting thing though, I remember there's a moment in time where, you know, I brought a fish back to my parents' house It was a yellowtail. I told my mom that I was going to cook it up. I butchered it up, filleted it up, and I proceeded to throw the bloodline away. And she stops me, grabs my hand. He's like, "Why are you throwing away the bloodline?" I was like, "Don't you remember? We eat bloodline all the time." I was like, "But Mom, that's what I've been trained, so I'm taught. I didn't know you could eat bloodline." And she brought up these reminders that my dad used to cook with bloodline. And I remember that was delicious. So it completely changed my perspective on what my professional culinary training suggests. And I started to open my ear even more so to listen to how my mom perceives and interacts with food. And it was pretty simple. I just had to shut up and listen.
Nó ngoài cái mẹ với ba làm việc bằng hai cái tay chân cực quá rồi. Khi mà đời sau của mình á, rồi con với lại Tú á, là mẹ chỉ muốn nó làm giống như là có thể là làm nghề văn phòng hay là làm cái nghề gì mà nhẹ nhàng hơn, đừng có lao động, thì cho nó đỡ bớt cái khổ đi. Tại ba với mẹ làm cực lắm, tại vì mình từ Việt Nam mà ba với mẹ Việt Nam với lại cha mẹ nghèo, đâu có cho đi học cao giống như mấy người con nhà giàu. Nhưng mà nó nói nó muốn rồi đâu có biết làm sao, rồi nó bắt đầu học cũng không có tưởng tượng nổi. Nhưng mà ba nó vui lắm, tại vì ổng đi khoe người ta, ổng nói ổng không có tưởng tượng mà nó thành công ở cái ngày này. Mẹ cũng vậy, mẹ cũng sợ lắm, tại vì đâu có thấy ai mà con nít Việt Nam đẻ bên Mỹ mà bây giờ biết nấu đồ Việt Nam, vậy thành top ship nữa. Vui. Mẹ với ba rất là vui.
I'm proud of my parents and their instinct to survive. The food industry is obsessed with innovation, but real revolutions in food come from people like my parents. You can give them any ingredient, put them in any situation, and they'll make something delicious. It happens every day, all over the world, and I pass that on. Noble, right? Inform yourselves. Know what's in season and purchase according to the recommendation. You dream, and then you tell everyone around you, this is where I'm trying to get to. There's passion for that too. There's people who are fashion designers, you know what I mean?
Yeah, fashion is cool. I like fashion.
Yeah. I got all these accolades, and they always seem to be amazed that I learned from an informal cook, which is my mom. And they consider these dining institutions that I've worked for as formal training. What they don't understand is that the techniques and skills and palette that my mom cooks with, that sort of training predates any fine dining menu or any fine dining restaurant by a few hundred years. So at the end of the day, if you're talking about formal training, it's my mom's cuisine that's the formal training, not the other way around. But also know from my parents, the image they have of all this is different. Because the food they cooked, it's ultimately war food. Everything right now is the generational result of war. So maybe my working in food reminds them of something they like to forget. But I don't know how you forget things that are so much a part of what you are. And it's something I learned from my parents. If you have a fish, you take out the bloodline just so you can forget it's a fish. What are you really eating? It's like when people write about our food. They say infused with generations-old wisdom. But they don't say that I learned how to make beautiful things from a seamstress. you.